Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Telling Tales video about Call of Cthulhu. This is a little interlude video that we're doing. So we've just finished the second arc, Fingask, and this is a little bit of information on what the characters have been doing between the first two arcs and the third arc. And we're also going to do some character improvement stuff. So all those ticks that everybody's been putting down that they thought were never going to amount to anything will amount to something. So that's all very exciting. We have some characters returning from the first arc and some from the second, which is nice. We'll have a little mix up. It's always nice to have returning characters. Sam and Matt had two characters to choose from each, and have both settled on their characters from the first arc for this. Very exciting. And Inga returning with Eliza and Steve with Edmund from the second arc. Great. Let's do some tick stuff.
I feel like people are going to be sad at me for not playing Albert, but I'll explain that later, folks, okay? I know people liked Albert. I liked Albert.
Albert was great.
Albert was great.
He was. All the characters have been great.
Jemima was great too.
Yeah. For any skill on which you have a tick on your character sheet, you roll a d100, and essentially, if you fail the roll, so if you get over the number on your sheet, or if you roll over a 95, if your skill is that high anyway, then you roll a d10 and you add that number onto that skill. So if you've got 45 in a skill that's ticked and you roll a 50, then you would roll a d10, and if you rolled a 6 on the d10, your new score in that skill would be 51.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, right? Was that explained clearly enough? I hope so. So yes, and if you succeed on any, especially if you go up by a significant chunk, then please let us know, because that'll be interesting. And also, if you attain a skill of 90% or more during this, you gain 2d6 sanity points, which represents the discipline and self-esteem gained in mastering a skill. Having mastered numerous skills in my life, I can confirm that my sanity was improved greatly.
I've been forgetting to do that.
Well, I just failed a roll for my firearms skill, so Eliza might be shooting more stuff in Arc 3. Exciting.
Nice.
We're only adding 2 overall, so...
I love the only thing you hit was that person in the head.
Innocent person.
Yeah. Or like, not in the head, but in the shoulder or something accidentally, wasn't it? That was the only actual shot you made.
Yeah, but her confidence is now through the roof, and that's what you need.
Nice.
She knows she can shoot at something and hit it.
Do I untick that now from my character sheet?
Yes.
It's fresh,
yeah. Everything will become unticked.
Cool.
Jemima only managed to level one thing. She managed to level listen, which is pretty good.
Dean also.
What did you go? Listen. What did you go from and to for Jemima?
I only got 4, so I got from 20 to 24.
Okay.
Useful.
20 to 23 here.
On listen as well.
On listen as well. We're gonna be all ears.
I think it's like the most common skill you use, probably. It's that or spot hidden.
Well, I've gone from a 40 to 42 for firearms, and from a 50 to 55 on library use.
Nice.
Much better in the library. I mean, you did do a lot of library using, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
There was that big chunk of librarying.
Yeah, I've not succeeded. Well, I've succeeded on my roll, so I've... Oh, no, wait, hang on. A 10 and a 0 is... No, that's just 10, not 100.
Yeah.
So no, I don't improve my listen score, sadly. And I don't improve my spot hidden.
Okay. Steve, Edmund, get any improvements?
Yeah, so I had 3 to try of library use, psychology, and astronomy. I failed rolls with library use and psychology. So my library use goes up by 3 from 60 to 63. And my psychology, which I managed a fluke roll on during the scenario, that goes up from 10 to 20. So
wow.
Wow.
That's good.
And the psychologist. That's
Getting
like
some real insight into people. It's nice. You've seen things now. You understand people better.
20 is like a 20% chance of getting insight to someone.
Yeah, it's not. But, you know, it's still double. So.
Yeah.
It's true.
That's great. So everybody got some improvements, which is nice. So the next thing is gaining sanity points. I would like to provide you with a keeper's reward for the things that the characters face during each of the arcs. So if you roll a d6 and add that much onto your current sanity.
I rolled a 3.
Yeah.
You can also choose to spend time with somebody listed in your backstory as a form of psychological support during the downtime, if you want to do that.
I think Eliza might have gone back to, well, probably not an actual grave, but the marker for her fiance, George. Not to make sure he's actually dead, but you know, from the experience
with
the
a
last episode, I think.
Jeez. That is oof.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
I don't know how much, like, I guess there's a fair amount of time, so Jemima probably would have spent some time, as well as doing other things, walking in the hills, probably maybe down south or something there, close to where she lives, with Emma Billington, who is the sister of her husband, who died in the war, and is like a close friend.
Okay.
So I think Dane would have spent a very short amount of time with his parents, but probably like in the context of the time period we're talking about, probably, I don't know whether that'd be significant enough, Jonny, to count. Probably like a week or two. And
okay, yeah, I think that would be enough. What I would question with Jemima and Dane there is whether they are basically, while with those people, are they discussing anything that happened, or are they basically trying to distract themselves and forget everything?
with Dane, I think it's the latter for sure.
I think Jemima was sufficiently unaffected and also trusts Emma more than like anyone else, so she would be discussing it with her. Within, like, not trying to scare her, though, you know.
Yeah.
Within reason.
Okay. Anything for Edmund, Steve, other than the psychological support that he actually receives from psychiatric support from Mary Brown's kind offer?
No, then. Well, he will have been conversing with his old professor, I think. But whether that, again, that's probably, that wasn't to distract himself or anything. That's he's quite taken with trying to find out more about what you know, the true state of the world. Although he won't be telling his professor that, it's just sort of digging around and discussing the fringes of science. So whether that's in any way beneficial for sanity or not, I don't know. Possibly not.
Yeah, I think if it's all right with you, probably not. However, I think if you... So, for Edmund, I think if you roll a D3,
okay.
and that's the sanity regained from the psychiatric assistants, the sort of triage post-events. And the way that this works for Dane Jemima, What exactly is Eliza doing, Inga? So you've said about visiting the grave.
Yeah, I think in terms of like going back, like, so it's not someone who's like listed really on the backstory or kind of character sheet, but I think she would have kept working for a paper, but I think she would have got a bit obsessive. I think about trying to find, like, given that Mary had said she was thinking of running for office and clearly has knowledge of this book and there's some sort of secret organization. I think she'll have effectively become a little bit of like a lizard people conspiracy theorist and kind of looking for signs of like otherworldly powers, like in seats of like political kind of power, and like I think probably I think she'd have kind of gone way off tangent on the stories that she would have been working on, and probably not like saying outright what she's experienced, but kind of alluding to there being like something deeper and like otherworldly things that, you know, obviously I doubt anyone takes her seriously, and I think she'll have ended up losing her job a few times, gone to a new paper, started off, you know, kind of doing the story, but again, getting distracted, trying to follow like these threads that probably don't go very far.
This doesn't sound
To
like
me,
sanity.
that sounds like no sanity.
I don't think it's great for sanity. Yeah, I mean, I rolled a 6 on the D6 you said to roll for the sanity.
For the initial one, okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't
Right.
think he's been doing anything that's terribly healthy for her mental health.
Okay. For Jemima and Dane, the way this works is you make a sanity roll, please.
Okay. 1.
Ah,
Yeah, I rolled a 5.
Wow.
great. Okay.
Pretty nice sanity.
So you both regain 1d6 sanity points again.
Another 1.
No.
That's 3
So
for me.
basically, you both find your respective trips quite healing and relaxing, and come out of the other side of it feeling like there's been kind of a stopgap between the events that happened previously and what comes afterwards. Quite a sort of healthy buffer there. Unlike Edmund and Eliza.
In time wise, this our story was after the story we just had, though, correct? So it's actually a bit
Correct.
It's close. Okay, I'm just to
Yes.
get this in place.
Yeah, I think 3 months, I think.
Okay, it's not that big a gap.
Um,
We don't know when the next story's starting yet. So.
Not
If
yet.
only we'd warned you somehow.
Can we presume there is a fairly significant amount of time, though, just for story purposes? It's not like
It's
a month or something.
it's years.
Okay, got it.
Yes. Yeah, I'll tell you now because it might be relevant to your stuff. So the next story, 1929.
Okay.
So it's 5 years or 5 and a bit years between the arcs, and
Do we need to do anything regarding if we've crossed age boundaries? Because, you know, you have a starting age, and
I don't.
That seems like a
It
fad.
doesn't say
It does seem
anything about it. Oh, it does say about aging. Okay, we'll get to that. So, credit rating and finances. So, has anybody made a substantial change to their employment or money situation? Eliza and Jemima, I believe, have.
Well, I guess since Eliza's has already explained a bit, Jemima, similar somewhat to Eliza, although a little potentially less manic about it. She was very intensely scientific about wanting to investigate the book and all these other things that she discovered. Being that everything is science to her and everything must be science, she had to prove it and demonstrate it and then aim to get it published in some verifiable journal. Of course, that's quite challenging when it comes to anything vaguely eldritch, or as can be imagined. So, and I don't think she didn't have the book at the end. She did give it back as well, which obviously doesn't help. But she does have the spell, which we might get into a bit later. But nonetheless, she, I think, probably ended up eventually. Maybe it took a few years because she was, fairly well respected and things. Ended up losing her association with Bristol University and kind of I don't think they really take away, your award of a doctorate, but she doesn't really wear that badge anymore. She isn't really employed as such anymore.
Yeah.
I think she probably still writes, for different people, and maybe meets smaller fringe interest groups and maybe advises on things, writes some papers and things perhaps, but it's, yeah.
Jemima maybe falls under tightening one's belt.
Yeah.
The option above that is life goes on as usual, which is obviously not the case. And further down than that is sold the family silver. And then below that is bad luck and troubles.
Yeah, I don't think we're quite at that point. 5 years after, she's probably just tightening one's belt for the moment.
So it's the investigator is demoted or takes a period of unpaid leave. That seems relatively...
Yeah.
So in that case, you decrease your credit rating by 1d10. That may be the same for Eliza.
And then I get the high roll.
When you least want it, yeah. I think probably similar for Eliza. Like, I don't think she'll have stopped working entirely, but I think she'd have, definitely been job hopping a bit and not working for such good papers and getting the less good stories and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that could basically fall under demoted or unpaid leave if you're in and out of jobs and
as well. I got a 9 on my D10.
Oh dear. Edmund and Dane.
So Edmund is trying to hold it together at work. I think he's fine. He's okay. He's just a little bit more distracted. So perhaps rather than coming up with designs for whatever he's supposed to be doing, sometimes he'll sort of get carried away and start doodling different things. So. He's okay at work. It's fine, but yes, he's a little bit more distracted. So holding it together, I think.
Okay, fine. So no change there.
So for Dane, I think he was in a period of sort of limited means during that arc. So he just returned from an unsuccessful expedition and was kind of pretty much at that point holding it together. I think by the end of the period of time we're talking about, he will have kind of established himself in a relatively steady role, not necessarily going to be of great means, but probably improved versus previously. He's going to have a steady job in a sense, which I suppose I can get into more detail on a bit later, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. So in that case, probably things are looking up might be the relevant thing for Dane. If the investigator has been promoted, I suppose getting a steady job is a promotion from. So add 1d6 to your credit rating. Re the credit rating and other effects it has, your cash, assets, and spending level may well have been affected by your credit rating change.
Okay, that's a 6. So
nice.
Yeah, smashed on the credit rating.
So. If we go, first person for me is Inga for Eliza, I think. What's your credit rating gone from and to?
I'm struggling to find where I had credit rating on the...
Oh, it's a skill. It's in as a skill.
Oh, yeah, there we go. All right, so it's decreased from 10 to 1.
Oh, ouch.
Wow.
Oh, no.
That's... you didn't have a lot of money, did you?
Proper freelancer levels.
Yeah. You'll have £1 of cash, £10 of assets, and a £2 spending level.
£10 of assets in total. Oof.
Matt, what's Dane gone from and to?
From 30 to 36.
Okay, so your cash is credit rating times 2, so I guess you'll go from 60 to 76. All right. Oh no, 70. Hang on.
72.
I added wrong. Yes. Your assets are credit rating times by 50. 1,800.
This is why we have John here.
Yes. 36 times 50.
It's 1800, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we have ones, isn't it? Rather than...
I think. Yes.
And your spending level is £10.
Lovely, thank you.
Jemima?
I was on 25, now on 17.
Okay, so £34 cash, credit rating times 2. Assets, credit rating times 50, 850. Is that right?
Still have the
I think
house,
that's right.
It's sold some things.
Pretty certain that's right. And £10 spending level.
And
for
Edmund is holding steady on a credit rating of 20.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yours hasn't changed, has it? So nothing to mess with there. So reducing sanity limits by 1. So the only person this might relate to is Edmund. I think, really. So you lost 5 sanity points to, we'll say, the ringmaster or the hare or whoever you want to.
Or both, or
a
multitude of...
So if you make a note of that somewhere on your sheet, and then but mark a 4 next to it instead of a 5, because it'll have reduced by 1 for this player development phase. And that's just to do with basically how much of that thing you can deal with again without being kind of thrown off. It's under the getting used to the awfulness thing.
Right. Does that mean I'm going to be in a better position if I see that again, or a worse position?
Better, because what it means is you can only lose up to the maximum sanity loss for one thing.
Gotcha.
So if the maximum sanity loss for that thing were 5, you could now only lose 1 more sanity to that thing because you've still got the 4 there from it previously.
No. Okay. I'd just like to say, Steve, you're in a lot worse trouble if you see that again.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it knows us now, or at least it knows 2 of us.
There is the potential for training during this period. But we might see what you say that you've been doing in the interim, and then we can decide on that. Aging, however, is anybody going to jump sort of a decade bracket that isn't 30? Because nothing happens between 20 and 40.
This is 5 years, isn't it?
Yes.
So Edmund will be turning 40 at the end of the 5 years.
His birthday could be the start of the session.
Hey, cake. Something jumps out of the cake.
It's a hair. You make an improvement check. There's a hair in my cake. You make an improvement check for education.
Okay. And this is, again, something I want to fail, presumably. Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, good job with that. I do not fail my education roll.
Okay. You then... this is all bad then. You deduct 5 points among strength, constitution, and dexterity. So 5 points between those 3 stats. And also reduce your appearance by 5, and also reduce your movement by 1.
Okay.
Getting old sucks.
Yeah.
I don't like
I can vouch for it.
real.
Yeah, it's too real.
I have to say, I'm sure some people scale up as they get older.
What happened to the maturing like a fine wine business?
Yeah. Well, how do we know Edmund doesn't become a silver fox?
Then again, there is
True.
always, maybe it's just representing that thing where, you know, when you hit like, I don't know, 30 or something, you just stand up and then you did it a bit too fast, and now your ankle will hurt for the next 3 days because you stood up too fast.
I think that's happened to me since my early 20s.
Yeah. There's an age you hit, isn't there? I think that's maybe what it's trying to encompass.
Right.
I'm also reminded of the Carter USM song, but
I'm also happy, this is the last bit, to chuck in this optional rule, which is recovering luck points. So you basically do an improvement check on your luck points. So if you fail a luck roll, then you can add D10 to your current luck score.
Yes, please. Did I spend 60 or 70 in that one?
Yeah, we took all our luck, didn't we? I did as well.
No, I rolled a 4.
I succeeded by 1 point.
Oh,
No luck for this story then.
undo that.
oh, I
Yeah, I
failed
think,
my luck roll.
I think anytime, like, if Dane kind of says, "Oh, would I have this in my bag?" the normal time you'd ask somebody to make a luck roll, and they'd go, "I'm probably going to pass this luck roll, and I'll probably have the lantern with me while I'm in this cave." No.
Bag's just got
Did
a
you
hole in it.
pass or fail, Matt?
I did fail because I only have like 10 luck left, I think. Yeah. So then is it a D6? Sorry, to add to that.
It's a D10.
A
D10.
D10. Oh, happy days.
Nice. I get 5 luck
16
points
luck
back.
now.
Nice.
Nice. And I started with 70 or 80, I think. Anyway, well spent.
It was great. It
and
was such a good moment.
That, I believe, is all of that stuff. So, yeah, let's have a discussion about what everybody's been doing after their respective horrible experiences.
Shall I start with my other character? Because
Sure, yeah.
I've got 2, so it makes sense to kind of get out of the way first. So yeah, Albert, the one that people will be sad to not see back, he was significantly affected by the goings on of the last story. He lost a lot of sanity, and he's an old man. And I think it kind of hit him quite hard, particularly realizing that there was truly nothing that he felt that he could do in that kind of situation at the end. The cutting the rope at the big top was the... I'm assuming spoilers for everyone, by the way, you know. I mean, why are you here otherwise? And so he kind of went home not wanting to ask any more questions and just kind of wanting to forget it all. And funnily enough, I don't even think he got much consolation from shooting and hunting much anymore. It's probably quite sad, and probably what his immediate family were a bit weirded out by. He probably was unusually quiet for a long time, and maybe came back to himself a little bit in kind of the long term over a few years. But he was never quite the same again, I think. And I think other characters have vaguely mentioned they might go and see him as well and try and talk to him. And he's always friendly and happy to see people. But I think bringing things back up with him particularly will never sit well and right with him. And he's kind of, I wouldn't quite go as far as broken man, but definitely seriously, damaged by what happened, I would say.
How's
He just didn't want to kind of push these things or be interested in them any further, which is my reason for not playing him. It didn't seem right, I think. So.
how's his relationship with Willie, and how's Willie doing?
Yeah, I think it brought him closer to Willie. I guess it is my choice, not Johnny's choice, how Willie's doing. I don't know. What do you think, Johnny? I would say Willie is probably bothered as well, but Willie probably recovers much better because he didn't see as much.
I picture, it might be because of the way that I chose to play Willie, but you never told me that it was wrong. So no. I figure he's probably spending a lot of his time worried about Albert. I figure previously his sort of, kind of servantly behavior would have been probably relatively lighthearted because they got on quite well. And I feel it probably would have become quite serious, probably less lighthearted now.
Yeah, I feel like Willie's always kind of been aware that like Albert treats him a little bit like a son as well. He's always known that, so it's kind of that edge that Willie knows of too. I suspect on like the lighter note too as well. Maybe after this, Willie become much closer in a genuine way rather than him kind of being the employee of Albert's, which is always on the edge of it, and it's less like that. And that's very maybe a nice part of the ending for the both of them, where they become a lot closer, more like family.
See, I can't remember now whether you've explained the backstory on stream or not. I can't remember whether.
Don't think so.
I don't
That
think
was a Discord exclusive.
Should I keep it as a Discord? I don't know how these things work. What do people think? Should I tell? It's only a moment of backstory between the two.
I think it'll be lost to the several scrolls away on the Discord.
Okay, well,
Probably by now.
So Willie was so basically Albert lost all three of his sons in the Great War, and although he's a very chipper person, that obviously affected him very seriously. But he did also, as a semi-related thing, obviously he's both Willie's parents were kind of household servants of Albert's and faithful, and actually the family had been together for a long period, as a lot of families would have been. But there was basically some terrible, I say mischievous, but like nefarious trickery in the household that ended up getting them kicked out because of things that they did not do. And by the time Albert had gone to make amends with them, both of them had sadly died of illness. But Willie was a young babe at that point, who was their young child and was still alive in an orphanage when I went to find him. So I took him in and raised him at the house and kept him there. And I'm not sure. I suspect it probably did initiate Albert explaining the details of this to Willie, because he never did. He could never own up to it. But actually, probably given all the sad things that happened, the stressful thing that happened here, he probably did actually go on to explain it to Willie, which would have been interesting given that Willie's come a lot closer to him. And then he found out that Albert kind of got his parents killed. So not sure how that would have played out. I don't want to describe how everything happened. Maybe that's another sad part to the ending. I don't know. Oh God, it's a tragic character I've made. It's partly your fault, Jonny. It's not just my fault.
Wow.
So that's why I'm still Albert. That's why I'm not playing him now, guys.
It's so heartbreaking. Like, I'm so sad for Albert and Willie.
And Willie.
He was just such a lovable guy at the beginning as well.
Yeah, I know. I deliberately wanted him to be over the top lovable given his backstory, because you kind of don't pick it up at first and you're like, oh no.
Matt, do you want to do some on Samuel, and then we've
covered off the remainder. So for Samuel, I think he kind of immediately would return to London to his wife after the events, but has reveals pretty much nothing to her about it, about anything that happened, and just kind of purports to go back to work. But he effectively spends a number of months sort of sitting at his desk, not really doing anything, not really sure what to do with himself, sort of kind of paralyzed, I guess, in terms of how to move forward. I think he does receive some, and Inga, let me know if I'm all right to say this, but receives possibly some communication from Eliza.
Definitely.
Is that okay to mention? Yeah. So I think Eliza reaches out to Samuel to ask about his research and the work that he'd been doing as a sort of parapsychologist previously, which again, I don't think was explicit in the recordings, but was inferred. Kind of basically Samuel had been investigating kind of strange happenings and things like that around the country, but he'd been doing it in quite a cynical way, where it was really, he didn't really believe anything that he was finding, but he was very interested in kind of enhancing his own status and, kind of taking advantage of the people who maybe were sending him stuff. And he's very torn about what to do with this research after he receives this request from Eliza, but ultimately decides to package everything up that he has and send it to her with a request that it then gets sent on to Mary on the off chance that it's useful for anybody. after that, he tells his wife that he wants to move out the city, which is something that she'd been wanting for a long time. So she's delighted, but he doesn't expand on why. And before they leave London, he makes a number of visits, again, without his wife knowing. Most of those are to people that he corresponded with about these cases. And again, without kind of going into detail, it's kind of a bit of an apology tour. It's like a bit of a humble tour for him to kind of meet the people and maybe try and just talk to them. And obviously it was a very humbling experience for him to kind of have been so cynical about kind of supernatural phenomena and then, encounter everything that he did encounter at Fingas. But he also visits the family of a young man who was killed in a friendly fire training accident during the First World War that Samuel was involved in. He was kind of indirectly responsible for a firearm kind of mistake during training then, and it killed someone. So yeah, that was where Samuel's kind of fear of firearms was coming from, despite not having kind of active duty. Him and his wife then moved to the Isle of Harris, and he teaches at a school and becomes increasingly involved in the local church in a kind of positive way. And he looks to be sort of setting himself up to move into that at some stage, to retake over the parish or something. Yeah, but that's him. I don't think he really leaves the island after that. So again, that's why I'm not playing Samuel.
That's more uplifting than mine. That's nice.
Yeah, much more. Yeah.
There's one question. I don't know whether this this goes anywhere or not. I was always, during the sessions, I was always interested to know whether there was something in Samuel's backstory that precipitated the shift from scientist to parapsychologist.
So in my head, what I think happened when the kind of dishonorable discharge from the military happened was that it was such a sort of egregious error, and that he kind of pendulumed the other way into sort of trying to make himself respectable and, well reputed in some field, but didn't have the skill set to really make it work within science. And so was just looking for he was quite opportunistic, looking for something that he could make his name in. And that might kind of, he could be in the papers 100 times for this, and the one time that he was involved in this awful accident would be sort of buried. I think that was what his thinking was. So yeah, but very, very, much for his own purposes. I don't know if that's satisfactory.
Oh, that's great. It is. It's great. It's great. We now actually get to, because all of these things as a player, because we don't. It's probably worth pointing out. All of the backstory, we don't share it in advance. So these little hints and things, they're as new to us in the sessions as they are to anybody watching. So it's great now to get some closure on,
yeah, that was really nice to hear about the exact reasoning for the gunshot with the backstory, and the parapsychology thing as well, as almost an attention thing in that context. Like, look at me for this reason. That's fascinating.
It was a real story. I read it was mad, and it was during the First World War. It happened a bunch of times. There were all these friendly fire accidents during training because it was kind of mismanaged, and there was obviously like the push to just get as many bodies out there as quickly as possible. So it was all kind of mishandled. But there were quite a few times where like there'd be loaded rifles that someone would be cleaning and they would discharge, and things like that were happening quite a lot. So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. Not something I'd ever really heard about before.
Yeah.
Okay, who wants to go with the first live character? I mean, they're all alive still.
Well, in 2021, maybe not. Probably not.
And if they are, then that's the creepiest thing about this whole.
I guess we've touched a little bit on Eliza with Samuel, so I'll maybe jump in then. I think Eliza would have been. I think there's definitely kind of an option that she would have kind of gone the routes of trying to kind of get away from it and being a bit overwhelmed by the otherworldly vastness of the whole thing, except for Mary at the end. I think she'd have become a bit obsessed with Mary because that was a much more human element. And like she's not a scientist, she doesn't understand that stuff, but like that human element, I think, would have been the thing that she latched onto. And the idea that there's someone who has expressed an interest in running the Parliament, who has now access to this weird book that seems to be able to summon these creatures and stuff. I think she'd have become, like I mentioned before, a bit obsessed with the idea that, there might be other powers at play in politics around the world, and would have become a bit obsessive about trying to kind of find the lizard people kind of thing. So I think that's what she would have latched onto. She definitely would have tried to reach out to Mary. I'm not sure how much Mary would have responded with things, and would have definitely like kind of tried to follow her career as much as possible. I think she'd have tried to stay in touch with the rest of the guys from Fingask, and would have very gratefully received Samuel's research and followed up with, tried to maybe speak with the people that he'd spoken to and see if there was any similarities in terms of the stories and stuff. Although it sounds like there probably wouldn't be if they were mostly sort of, not real kind of story, more of the kind of real world mediums and that kind of thing. And she would have tried to reach out to Albert and kind of stay in touch there a bit, but I think would have kind of lost interest a little bit if he wasn't so willing to talk about things, because I think she would have grown a bit more obsessed. I know, like, it breaks my heart to say that, but I think she would have done. But especially if Edmund was going to continue research, reaching out to him, again, maybe hear a bit more from Steve in a sec about what Edmund's been up to. But if he was more willing to kind of talk about this stuff, I think she'd have kept more closely in touch with him. Again, she's not a scientist, so I don't think she'd have really tried to understand any of that stuff. But yeah, trying to find the kind of human stories behind this, or understanding where things were in terms of like seats of power. She'd previously been a foreign correspondent, so after her fiance died in the Great War, she'd kind of spent as much time abroad as possible. She's not really been in the UK that much since the war, and she was covering kind of affairs of the war abroad as well. So it's been a good while since she'd been in the UK, like for any long period of time. But I think after Fingask, she'd have settled in a little bit more and tried to kind of trace things down in the UK a bit, and maybe spent some more time in Scotland and back down in London as well. And yeah, just kind of trying to sort of chase stories and going off on some mad tangents, and becoming a bit of a conspiracy theorist, really, around some of this. I'm not sure she'd have really got too far with things. I don't think her credibility would have, or her decreasing credibility would have really got her very far with Mary. But I think she'd still be a bit obsessive about it. She definitely wanted answers, and I don't think she really got them. She got enough hints of things to kind of keep pursuing. But yeah, still looking for those answers. So I think that's kind of where she'd be at, even 5 years later. Do you
imagine, given that she has a literal 1 credit rating at this point, she's almost kind of hopping between people's houses, living? How do you imagine she's living, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I think probably veering a little bit into the slightly exploitative kind of way that Samuel had been, and like maybe even, I mean, she would have been a lot less threatening, I guess, that potentially than Samuel might have seemed. Like, old ladies who are trying to contact their dead husbands or whatever, like probably staying with them as she travels around the country for things like that. And when she was working in the papers, I guess they'd have put her up if she's covering stories. So probably effectively homeless, but like, not out on the streets homeless, but, not having like an actual kind of settled base. She's not really got much family. And after her fiance died, she didn't really have that much by way of kind of ties and things like that. So yeah, I think she'd probably be getting pretty desperate about this point. Like she wouldn't really have much to live off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Who wants to go next? Steve, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess we can start with the end of the scenario. Edmund was out cold for around about 3 hours, I think. So we'll have missed the ending. We'll have missed seeing the leering ringmaster, or Mary Brown and her bag of tricks. So I guess when he comes to, rather confused and dazed, he'll have known nothing that's gone on. So we'll have been very eager to sort of to ask questions and figure out what went on there. So presumably this is all kind of in retrospect with Eliza maybe or the others before they go their separate ways. Certainly he'll have been looking at the papers afterwards, and he'll have written a letter to Mary Brown to thank her for all that she's done. But also, yes, he's quite interested and keen to know more, and keen to know Mary Brown's place in it all. Now, whether, of course, he gets any real response from her is that's an outstanding question. But yes, what do the papers say? I guess we should ask that question up front.
The papers announce that Sir John was found having killed himself, and that it was believed that it was due to large debts that he owed to somebody in London, who was not named in the paper. And over the following days, there were stories in the paper from people who had been let go from Fingas Castle in sort of the weeks leading up to the time that you were all there. And that they'd basically been sort of paid off to keep quiet about the fact that they'd been let go with, like a month's wages up front kind of thing, and told to go try and find another job. And that's about it. And then it kind of moves off in the next news cycle and is replaced by other things.
Right. Nothing about a terror circus then, or anything like that.
It mentions the circus,
okay,
as having been there, but obviously everyone who was there was sort of entranced, and apart from you and Mary Brown. So as far as everybody else is concerned, they've been sort of enamored with the performance, and then all of a sudden there's kind of Sir John's body has become revealed in some way. Nobody's really sure how or what. And then it seems that nobody even noticed that the ringmaster had then disappeared, because in all the, everything that was going on, all the carnage of people being upset about that, and it seems to have been played off as a very natural occurrence. Nothing seems to be
natural, everyday occurrence.
Yeah.
Well, I forgot to ask as well, in terms of following Mary's career, and did she ever end up running for office in this time period, or make any other kind of political move that we would know of that would be kind of public in that way?
Yes. In an area to the west of Scotland, and I don't have the constitution name to hand, but I can get that. Yes, and she succeeds.
Of course she does.
Fascinating. Do I hear back from Mary Brown regarding any more info or her organisation? Or
she responds to you. There is certainly nothing in plain text that could give anything away if somebody were to intercept the letter.
Sure.
However, from the sort of tone of the letter, and you think upon reading some a few times, you think there's maybe sort of a couple of bits that are slightly out of place in the writing that you think might be alluding to other things.
Okay.
You certainly don't get the feeling that she's sort of playing you off and trying to make you think that nothing has happened. But she's also not saying, yes, all of this is going on.
Sure. Fascinating. So yes, I guess Edmund will have gone off to undergo a certain amount of care following his brush with whatever it was. And let me think. So yes, I think that he'll have started to maybe sort of as advised by his doctor to sort of try new things and express himself through art. He's started to in 5 years. I mean, I've got nowhere with skills in 5 years, so I don't know how far Edmund's got with his art, but so he'll have started sort of drawing things. He will have. He might not have shown. He'll probably keep a certain section of his catalogue private, and the private collection will be comprised of all sorts of sketches of what he saw through the lens. So the hair, the ringmaster, possibly with a slightly too wide grin, the sort of a monstrous, unholy shape that doesn't seem to sort of fit within this world, and presumably a manner of other shapes as well that he caught sight of throughout his vision. There is a couple of other things that he focuses on, I guess. One is the constellation, the set of constellations he saw on the cave wall. So there'll be various either paintings or sketches of those. And also, kind of unrelated to the other stuff is a painting, several paintings, in fact, probably of a figure that is wreathed in flame and standing in a sort of a mass of twisted metal. So that's kind of a recurring piece as well. In terms of what he's been doing with his spare time, he will have been corresponding with the other members of the Fingask party. Certainly he'll respect any, from Albert's point of view and Samuel's, any desire not to discuss events. He'll take that hint and just be civil and pleasant and ask them how they're getting on and keep in touch. But obviously anyone who's receptive to discussing the events of Fingask, he would happily indulge in more detailed conversations. He's also, as I mentioned, he'll have written to his professor on a number of occasions, his old professor, and starting to poke at the edges of science and some of these unexplained things and where, the points in science where theories break down and there are unresolved conundrums. He'll be poking and prodding at those and trying to work things out. And he's probably started to try to sort of experiment with various gizmos and constructions in his attic. Lenses and coils and all sorts of things that don't really work, but he's still, he's trying to replicate essentially the things that he saw. He's trying to find some path towards what those might have been. And yes, he'll have been visiting old bookshops and things like that, and just trying to find threads of this tone that he'd seen, these things that he'd experienced. He's definitely, his eyes have been opened, and he's not about to look away.
I had a question, which was, firstly, does Edmund have any success, however kind of small or remote, with any of his kind of experiments? And equally, does he still think that this is kind of sat within the realm of science, but it's science that we don't understand? Or is that kind of where his head's at with it, what he experienced?
As to whether anything succeeds, I think that's going to be a question for the keeper.
How much time do you think Edmund would have spent in backstreet arcane bookshops?
I think a reasonable amount. Edmund doesn't have much of a life outside his work, so he has kind of a frosty relationship with his sister, who never really forgave him for taking active service during the war when he could have done something a rather less dangerous. So yeah, he doesn't have much of a. He's kind of focused. So outside of work, he has a fair amount of time to spend. And he's quite driven, I think.
And what exactly is it that you're trying to create or find?
In terms of finding things in bookshops, he's looking for weird old tomes that kind of match the sort of one that he saw. He doesn't really know what he's looking for specifically, other than things that stand out, things that don't fit. And in terms of the experiments he's trying to do, it's to do with light, I guess. It's to do with he was totally thrown by the idea that something can, a solid wall can turn into something else when you look at it. So experimenting with light, maybe trying to to polarize it or focus it or amplify it or change it somehow. He'll have been trying to do that.
Okay,
I
will say that
as a scientist, though. Sorry, I suppose as a scientist, I was just thinking that's interesting because Edmund will know that it was physical as well, though, right? Because the wall itself was impossible to go through. It wasn't just vision. So sorry, Jonny, just interrupting.
That's fine. Edmund's jumping in early on the quantum quantum theory here. I will say that Edmund has found a number of books that he thought were relevant or might be relevant, but were not. But in amongst that, there will be one book which I will look in another book later and give you a name of. It's not Necronomicon, but I know that one. I'll find you another tome that he can have picked up. And I would say that in terms of kind of succeeding with anything to do with your light, would he be doing all of his experiments with typical scientific equipment? He's not gone.
I've not gone any
and purchased any weird.
I've not gone sort of in expeditions to weird foreign lands to dig up weird crystals. No, not yet. Not yet.
Okay. In that case, I think that you have had limited to no success in the experiments themselves. Probably a couple of moments of thinking, ooh, when you might see maybe a bit of light on a wall that's past what you're pointing your bit of light at, but then it's actually just that a curtain's come loose or something, and that's what's there. So yes, but we'll give you a tome. I'll find a tome for you.
I was wondering whether he'd half invented a laser, but power is going to be an issue. So
that's interesting from John. Quantum mechanics was coined in the early 1920s and was first used in Bond's 1924 paper, The Quantum Mechanic.
So you were a little bit ahead of Heisenberg and
a little bit.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, the photoelectric effect was identified in 1887. Albert Einstein first, basically came to what we think is the explanation in 1905. The term photon wasn't devised until 1926. So this is like the perfect time period to be studying light
Is
and
great.
going, what the hell? It's cool.
Good.
So there we are.
Do you think is that everything for Edmund? Do you think?
I think so. Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
So Dane or Jemima?
Guess I might as well go then if we keep in order. If you're all right with that. So yeah, Jemima. It's gonna sound a little bit like I'm echoing Edmund here, I think. But Jemima also very much a person of science. She believes that absolutely everything that occurred in the Darkwood arc must be explainable by something that is within our realm. It's simply that we haven't grasped it yet. It has not been understood correctly. So she was relatively unaffected by the actual goings-on in the village, surprisingly, sanity-wise. So she, I think, pretty much dove straight into what actually happened. I think it's worth starting out as well. I didn't actually get any Cthulhu Mythos in that story, Jonny. Should we update that later rather than now? Because I feel like, given that I literally learned a spell, I probably have some. Do I have some Cthulhu Mythos?
We'll give you some, especially if you're continuing some research in that.
Oh, okay. Maybe after I've done my spiel, then yeah. Yeah. So Jemima, she kind of heads back. I think she probably does continue with her journey up north at first and does some walking as well, rather than going to Glasgow specifically, because she's quite an outdoorsy person herself. At first, kind of by herself, pondering what's happened, maybe calming her nerves a little after the strange occurrences. But then she heads back down to the university and kind of just tries to find out if it was a gap in her own knowledge. Perhaps these explanations, while these sorts of concepts are kind of cutting edge science somewhere, and it's simply that she doesn't know about it. Probably coming to the conclusion that's not true, and discussing it with multiple other kind of esteemed colleagues of hers and getting strange looks back. She probably dove quite deeply into the history of this sort of thing, because kind of a lot of what happened in Darkwood is really related to the old histories of the family. So I suspect a lot of her kind of research was related to kind of looking at other mysterious old family histories and strange traditions in villages in the middle of nowhere. She absolutely would have done a similar thing to Edmund, maybe even more so. Gone to strange occult like bookstores around the country. She would specifically, given that Jemima actually comprehended the writing and understood it, she would be specifically looking for that exact type of writing, like that script, those symbols, even briefly mentioned in anything. If it's just mentioned in other writings and stuff, but that's a lot of what her research would focus around. You know, if there's any old histories that have like just one of those symbols somewhere, that's what she would focus down on, try and record, and making lots of notes. And as time goes on, I think people start to think she's lost her mind a little bit. Something strange happened when she was walking in the hills or something. She kind of is, as I mentioned, she's kind of has some good relaxing time with some members of her family and close friends as well. Emma Billington, while she's walking the hills, and discusses these things quite calmly with her as well. I think she probably gets a little bit of worried reception from her as well, but support nonetheless. I think she gets to the point where she tries to publish journal articles while she's at Bristol University about these kind of alternative histories, partly probably discussing a lot of what happened in, I've tried to remember the name and I can't remember the name of the village, Jonny, I'm sorry.
Durrisdeer.
Durrisdeer, thank you. In the village, what happened in the village of Durrisdeer. So she's writes part of it on her experiences there and how this might be on the fringes of scientific kind of discovery in the future. And she does manage to get it published in a fringe journal. I'm sorry, I don't have a real fringe journal in my head at the moment. And effectively, it's considered to discredit the university that they were, interested in something like that. It was one of their professors interested in something like that. So they effectively kind of kick her out. I mean, it's kind of she loses her professorship and she stops being paid by them effectively. I imagine she's maybe still a fellow, maybe not. Maybe they got rid of that. I don't know. But she maybe tried to publish a few other things in newspapers and things like that as well. Discussed, met with people who might be interested in this sort of thing. But I think that's probably her, really. She's tried to find everything she can. She's pretty much dedicated herself to it wholly. I think we mentioned beforehand that maybe even Edmund has come across one of these papers or articles she's tried to publish, because we're both kind of looking at paranormal science on the fringes of science style things. So yeah, what might she have encountered, Jonny?
I think again, I will find a book for Jemima to have that will be written in the same script as the other one. And I might find a couple of others for you also, if that's kind of your main thing, is the book learning rather than... Go on.
There was one other thing. She learned a death spell from the book.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Because it's on my character sheet, she obviously has some comprehension as to what that is, while probably not complete comprehension of it. Being a true and genuine scientist, she absolutely would have found like a mouse and tried to test the death spell, maybe repeatedly over time, unless it caused her horrible anguish and she couldn't continue to do it. She probably would have really tried to figure out exactly what that was and how it worked, and maybe repeat it to really try and figure out how it worked. Yeah, I don't know how terrible an idea that is, but she would have tried to do it.
I'm just picturing like a pile of dead mice in the corner of the room next to a pile of occult tomes.
And you're not sure how terrible that is, Dan.
Yeah, well, I think Jemima actually does feel bad about it because she is quite an animal lover, but she's like, science of this is more important. Yeah,
Science
she is a scientist
of dead
after all.
mice.
Maybe she's tried it on a few different animals, snails, mice,
God.
maybe like a small bird. Does it work? Is it equally effective in all of them?
What's the POW cost for this death spell?
No, I know. I'm not sure if it's the same as it is for a human as it is for a mouse, then she probably doesn't keep trying it.
Yes, the casting is the casting difficulty is the same no matter what. However, you may find that if you went against, say, an elephant, it may be less effective than it would be against a small thing, but it's always as difficult.
Given how difficult it is, I suspect she never succeeds, because I think it would take an enormous amount of conviction to actually complete this spell, given that it's effectively greater than your hit points quantity to complete for Jemima. So I'm not exactly sure how that would have played out, whether it's just Jemima repeatedly trying to accomplish the spell and never succeeding, or if something else would change in it. I don't know how you would interpret that, Jonny.
I think that's up to you, really. If she's not going to go to sort of full conviction to do it, then probably nothing happens.
I suspect, given that she doesn't have anyone else scientifically she could trust, who could, make sure she doesn't die doing this, because everyone would just look at her like she's crazy trying to do this. She probably doesn't go full on. Yeah. So
I could imagine her sort of spending some days kind of in her mind, sort of upping her conviction about it each day, thinking that it's going to be kind of the level that she needs to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But actually sort of, going the whole hog and doing it maybe doesn't ever quite get there.
That's fair.
So yes, I'm gonna give Jemima 3 books, I think, and Edmund will have 1.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
We can discuss a bit of Cthulhu Mythos as well afterwards.
Yeah. Because it may be relevant to the book as well. I think each book has a different allowance. Matt, for Dane?
Sure, yeah. So it's kind of a funny one for Dane. I don't think there's quite as much maybe happening linked to the event and the circumstances, but sorry, that's Dora again. Basically, he will have. So originally, when he was heading up north, he was due to head to the Isle of Skye to do some kind of training with a view to going back to So he'd just returned from an expedition in the sort of Himalayas that had failed, and he was heading back to kind of recover and build his strength again with a view to heading back out. He won't head up straight to Skye after the events. He'll head home and spend some time with his parents. Again, he doesn't really talk to them about what happened, but he will sort of just spend time and rejuvenate and relax with them. Kind of after that point, he will sort of realize that he's actually kind of aging out of being able to do what he'd been doing before, but wants to put his skills to use, and will end up working for the Survey of India. So kind of supporting surveyors and cartographers to map the area that he'd spent some time in. So he's there to sort of lend his expertise to people who need to get equipment to, peaks and things like that to do mapping exercises and things. And that's where he kind of develops a steady job. But he's returning to London with some regularity from that as well. So every few months he'll be back. But otherwise spending quite a lot of time in kind of places like Darjeeling and areas like that. So it doesn't have a massive effect on him, but the only exception to that is he was suffering at the time of the first events. He was suffering from a kind of recurring nightmare that he was having while he was recovering from the initial expedition, and that was linked to kind of local mythology in Tibet, and was something he'd completely written off as being something that he'd just been reading about and speaking to people about, and then it just became a kind of fever dream when he was sick and recovering during the expedition. But part of him is sort of questioning a little bit of that. It's not linked. The nightmare is not linked in any way to what he saw and what he experienced, but he's less dismissive of that than he perhaps was a little bit before, and that might be why he's kind of found himself back in the sort of same area there when he maybe hadn't anticipated that he would be. But yeah, his life has kind of improved quite a lot because he's got a steady job, relatively steady job, steady income. His prospects are kind of on the up. So that's where he is.
All ready for the third arc.
Yeah.
Dave's just really happy out there, living the life he wants to live. Nothing could possibly go wrong.
What is this compared to it's so mean.
I think he's also I think socially he was quite nervous and he was struggling to adapt to meeting people and spending time with people during the first arc. But I think he will have settled quite a lot since then and probably matured quite a lot, even though he was already kind of 31. He's matured and is maybe kind of I don't know how kind of stabilize a little bit in that sense as well. That would probably be noticeable to someone like Jemima, who maybe hasn't seen him for some time. He's still having his nightmares though.
In fact, I wonder if Jemima might have tried to get in touch with some of the other folks. I was thinking she might have tried to get in touch with Esther and Dane after the story. So do you think Dane would have been available to be got by letter?
Yeah, for sure. I think he would definitely have maintained correspondence with anyone who'd got in touch, but it would have been there'd have been significant gaps. It would be sort of you'd be getting a response like a couple of months later, and so I don't know how for Jemima how satisfying that correspondence might have been, but for Dane he'd have done it, but perhaps not with it wouldn't be particularly awe-inspiring correspondence coming back from him either, unfortunately.
I see. I feel like that the fact that Dane seems like he's doing fairly well is probably gratifying, though. That's kind of what was hoped for in a way.
Definitely be responding.
It sounds like he's probably the most even, least obsessive of the guys coming back.
Apparently Jemima gets some replies from Esther as well, and Esther is halfway around the world and as far away as possible. As far away as possible is the literal description of where she goes.
I haven't actually spoken to Jack about Melvin, but I really like the idea that he's been made a junior partner in his uncle's law firm, like sort of having stood up to his uncle. His uncle's looked at him in a different light and kind of thought, maybe I should actually be treating him a bit better.
That's so perfect.
I'm so happy about that.
He's always been waiting for that moment when Melvin would stand up for himself, and he did.
Yeah, it's just been like a 25-year-long test.
Oh God, Melvin. Oh no. I don't think I could handle having Melvin in another story again. It's the whole story. Oh.
So yeah, I think that's it. That brings us up to date. The next arc, as I've said, will be in 1929. I'm not going to give you any more information now. I will do in the coming weeks. Yeah, so for anybody watching this, on the coming Monday, the 19th of July, we're going to be having a sort of discussion about the story so far, and I suppose Call of Cthulhu in general, and maybe a couple of other things. And then we have a week out on the 26th, and then we'll start the third arc on August the 2nd. And it's going to be very exciting. I really like bringing two characters from each season forward. That's going to be nice.
I'm really glad we did that. It's going to be super interesting as well, because now we've got people who are like experiencing these things and think they know stuff about it, and from the different arcs too. Although I like the dynamic, as Inga said, of kind of like 3 crazy conspiracy nuts and then just a chill dude.
That's probably good though, having your sort of grounding.
I'm glad we've got Dane. Yeah.
I think Edmund's probably a bit more like even in terms of how he's kind of doing his research and stuff. I don't get the impression he's like quite as obsessive in the slightly, or at least not in the slightly manic way that Eliza.
It sounds like he didn't leave his attic for a long time. So.
Well, yeah, all right, fair enough.
I mean, Edmund is focused. Everything he's doing, it's calculated.
That is what a conspiracy nut would say.
Is it fair to say that, like, behaviorally for Edmund, it wasn't a dramatic shift, but the target of the energy is changed a lot?
Yeah. Like I do think there's a difference between focus and obsession. And
yeah, you're right. I think it's more of an obsession for us too. To be fair, it seems like
yeah. See what happens.
Cool.
Forward to it.
But it's been great having this session.
I really liked hearing all, because I didn't know loads of that stuff for the backstories. It's super good, and it's really good to get closure for some of the characters. Like, it was nice to get that for Samuel and all. Oh.
I'm so happy for Samuel. I
know, it's lovely.
It's so fun to hear what was going on before as well. Some of the backstory I wasn't aware of. It definitely would make rewatching it quite interesting.
Cool. Anything else, John?
Not that I can think of, unless you want to briefly run down the non-Call of Cthulhu things.
Oh yeah, okay. Tuesday nights on the channel, Blades in the Dark at the moment. Wednesday nights, Coriolis at the moment. First Saturday of every month is a different one-shot with different players and GMs. The next one is Saturday, the 7th of August, and is the new One Ring system. And Matt is running it. That's going to be really nice. And bi-weekly on a Sunday, we have a guest spot on the Free League Twitch running Simba Room. And the next one is this coming Sunday, the 18th of July.
Yes.
Correct.
And we'll be back on the 19th with a chat, and on the 2nd of August with the start of the third arc. Yay!
Awesome.
Cool. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.